In the race for the White House, the latest Reuters Ipsos poll shows Donald Trump is closing the gap on Hillary Clinton with a little over 2 weeks before Americans head to the polls for the November 8th election. The poll, which was released on Friday local time, shows Trump has cut Clinton's lead in half this week, with the data showing his argument that the election is rigged against him is resonating with Republican voters. In the latest poll, Clinton led Trump 44% to 40%, a 4-point lead. That compares with 44% to 37% for Trump in the previous poll released last week.
Now, a new poll has revealed nearly 70% of Republicans think if a Democratic nominee to the White House, Hillary Clinton, becomes president, it would be due to illegal voting or vote rigging. According to Reuters and the Ipsos poll, only half of Republicans would accept Clinton as their president. Meanwhile, less than 50% of Democrats would attribute a win for Republican candidate Donald Trump to vote rigging. That poll shows a broad concern across the political spectrum about ineligible voters casting ballots, voter suppression, and the actual vote count. Now, however, the Republicans feel that concern more. 8 of 10 Republicans are concerned about the accuracy of that final vote count, whereas about 6 out of 10 Democrats are concerned about the vote count.
For a few hours this morning, they stopped the traffic. This was dubbed the Women's March. Venezuela's women say they are bearing much of this nation's pain. These demonstrations are not just for a Venezuelan audience. They are in part aimed at raising the profile of this country's beleaguered opposition internationally. The group's most prominent spokeswoman is Liliane Tintori.
The international community are with us. We travel around the world for 2 years and 8 months. This is a dictatorship.
In fact, the international community remains divided in its approach to Venezuela. Some countries, including the new governments in Brazil and Argentina, are cautioning Venezuela's government from ignoring its domestic critics. Others, many of which were represented at a recent Developing World Summit hosted by Venezuela, have offered near unconditional support to President Maduro. The latest dispute here involves a recall referendum designed to cut short Maduro's 6-year term of office. The procedure is written into the Venezuelan constitution. But on Thursday, the country's electoral authority abruptly suspended the process, citing alleged irregularities by the opposition.
One thing we've been hearing from many people attending this opposition rally is that they feel the government has now crossed the line.
A week-long sugar shortage has caused anger among Egyptians. The sugar crisis, which has hit the country recently, is one of the reasons behind the growing discontent against President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's management of the economy and his overall rule of the country.
This economic crisis is apparently one of the most important elements of delegitimizing the government and delegitimizing the promises and vows that it has made before that it will lead the people into prosperity.
Egypt produces over 2 million tons of sugar, but consumes about 3 million tons annually. The gap is filled by imports. But rising dollar rates and high global sugar prices have made it too expensive for many importers in recent months. But sugar is not the only scarce staple now. Many here have expressed their dissatisfaction over the lack of basic commodities and called on the incumbent government to find an immediate solution to this crisis.
What is happening in Egypt now is unbelievable. We can't find sugar, neither cooking oil, and many other things. Sisi has failed to deliver on his promises.
In essence, other products have disappeared from the markets, such as cooking oil, rice, as well as baby milk. Some complained that they could not even find certain medicines and that the prices had skyrocketed.
On Friday, hundreds of thousands of public and private sector workers nationwide joined a 24-hour general strike called by Italy's major base unions, including USB, Unicobas and CUB Trasporti. The unions said the industrial action was motivated by the need for more protection of labor rights and social welfare, which they believe has been tarnished by a series of reforms adopted by Prime Minister Matteo Renzi's government. Traffic in Rome was seriously affected by public transport strikes, while the situation in other big cities such as Milan and Naples seemed to be under control. In the Italian capital, demonstrations were staged in front of the education and the economy ministries. Teachers, nurses, bus drivers, flight attendants, firemen, clerks, all these public and private sector workers feel marginalized, underappreciated, almost forgotten by Italy's institutions. For many years they have demanded consecutive governments to adjust their salaries to the cost of living.
Trying to appease France's angry police. Interior Minister Bernard Cazeneuve met with union leaders on Wednesday to address their growing frustration. Policemen took to the streets on Monday after a Molotov cocktail attack gravely injured 2 officers earlier this month. They say they need more means, personnel and equipment to continue doing their job in a growing climate of insecurity. They're also demanding harsher punishment for authors of violence against police. Cazeneuve announced a series of measures on Wednesday, including buying new equipment and opening a national dialogue to address future grievances. He also vowed to simplify legal and investigative procedures. Union representatives called the proposed reforms a step in the right direction, but said they remain skeptical as to what comes next.
Multiple blasts in the Japanese city of Utsunomiya have left at least 1 person dead and 3 others injured. The cause of the explosions, which are said to have taken place almost simultaneously, is currently unclear. Images showed several burned-out cars and a building near one of the blast sites. Utsunomiya lies around 100 kilometers north of Japan's capital, Tokyo. Police are said to be investigating whether the incidents are linked. This man said there was such a strong shockwave. It doesn't compare with the explosion of gas canisters. After the first bang, there were much bigger explosions. The burned body of a man was also reportedly found in a nearby park where a folk festival was underway. The force of that blast ripping apart a bench.
Armed counter-terror police arrested the 19-year-old man on a busy street in North London yesterday lunchtime. A taser was used to subdue him. Police say at this stage they're not looking for anyone else and they're keeping an open mind as to motive. They're forensically examining the device found on an underground train at North Greenwich on Thursday. It's understood to have contained wires and possibly a clock. It was blown up in a controlled explosion. Detectives haven't said publicly whether it was a viable device, but there are several reports that it was. The Daily Telegraph says a message was sent out to military personnel before the arrest, warning of a suspected improvised explosive and the possibility of more such devices. The Guardian newspaper reports that the device was unsophisticated. Police are said to be examining the mental health records of the man arrested. Scotland Yard say there will be more armed police on the tube and at transport hubs in London to reassure the public. One rail workers' union, the TSSA, is calling for an urgent security summit with police. It describes the incident on Thursday as an all-too-real attack.
Law and order going high-tech. Police officers could soon be getting a new weapon.
Cheryl Cosone from our sister network Fox Business here with a look at that. Cheryl, good morning.
Yeah, good morning again, ladies. Well, you know, it could be the newest defense for police in a year where cop shootings have become an almost weekly occurrence. Taser International, that's the maker of stun guns and body cameras, is working on technology that would equip drones with stun guns that could be used by law enforcement. A drone with a stun gun. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, police officials sat down with company researchers. Drones could be used, for example, when a suspect or a terrorist is barricaded inside of a building, and the drones could also have cameras, lights, as well, of course, as that stun gun that would discharge an electric shock. But arming drones with stun guns could create controversy or misuse, something that police officials are certainly considering in these discussions. Jim Buerman, he's president of the Police Foundation, told the Journal, from a strictly tactical perspective, I see the potential value of this, but I also understand how apprehensive people are going to be. Now, he concedes the public may be alarmed by the potential technology. Still, ladies, you know, last year North Dakota passed a law that allowed police drones to be equipped this way. The question mark is the safety of the drone, and also if it's flying around at 50 feet, the accuracy of its use with a stun gun. So we're a long way from this, but it's a big discussion that's happening.
The Kremlin spokesman says Syrian President Bashar al-Assad must remain in power to prevent the country from falling into the lap of terrorists. Dmitry Peskov said that any attempt for the removal of Assad is, quote, thoughtless, adding that the fall of the Syrian government would lead to a new influx of refugees and more terror attacks in Europe. He also noted that Russia remains committed to the removal of all terrorist organizations in Syria. Peskov further noted that Moscow makes every effort to prevent the disintegration of the war-torn country. Syria has been gripped by over 5 years of war due to the foreign-sponsored militancy and terrorism.
With thick black and white smoke clouding the horizon near Mosul, area hospitals are overflowing with Iraqis struggling to breathe. The problems are linked to the toxic fumes from a burning sulfur plant set ablaze during fighting with Islamic State. Now nearly 1,000 people, including babies, are receiving treatment. Medical assistant Saddam Juma says the people began arriving Friday.
The cases presented were suffocation caused by the large fire in the sulfur factory near Kayara. Elderly men and women were affected, as well as children, especially those with asthma and bronchitis in other cases.
So far, no deaths have been reported, but many here fear that could change.
We are about to enter a tunnel dug by the militants of the so-called Islamic State. It's here in this village, or what remained of this village, just 20 kilometers east of Mosul. Let's see what's inside. These tunnels are very important and a key element in the military strategy of the jihadist group. As we can see, it's very tight. I can't stand properly, at least in this part of the tunnel. This tunnel was cleared in by the Kurdish forces known as the Peshmerga. They told us it's 100% clear, but they advised us not to touch wires and some stuff. So if we see on the floor here, many wires used for electricity, for communication. On the right hand side, here is a kitchen, or a mini kitchen. Empty glasses of tea, coffee, and on the right hand side, copies of the Quran and some religious texts. Also, this is a telephone used by the militants to communicate to the outside world. So we're nearly there, and finally we reached the exit point of this tunnel.
So this must be one of the rarest vehicles in the world. This is a VBIED, Vehicle-Borne Improvised Explosive Device, a suicide bomber's truck, captured before it could detonate. It's been incredibly carefully built. These wire protection structures, they may look faintly ridiculous, like something you might find in a garden centre. In fact, they are almost 100% effective against rocket-propelled grenades. Going head-on, this would have been very hard to stop with a standard infantry weapon. All of this is homemade armour. It's been welded on, again, to allow the vehicle to get through. Even the engine is inside an armoured block. And again, you have what's called this bar armour to protect the driver, but with a very small bulletproof windscreen there. The whole idea of this is not to keep the driver alive indefinitely, but long enough to get absolutely close to its final target, so that their enemies can be destroyed. Now, these have been put to absolutely devastating ends. Now, here we've got some Peshmerga who are experiencing life behind. They're even starting the engine for us. This is the very seat where a suicide bomber would have driven to his death, trying to take as many Peshmerga fighters with them as they can. This is a standard suburban vehicle that has been turned into one of the most fearsome weapons in this war of improvisation. Now let's take a look at what goes on in the back cab. Again, another armoured structure here to prevent anybody shooting the driver from behind. Very carefully thought through, quite skillfully put together, quite honestly. A pretty frightening notion. Now packed into this and protected again by yet more armour against premature detonation. Even the wheels, even the wheel hubs have got covers over them. The whole idea is that this vehicle mustn't be stopped until it can be finally stopped in a devastating moment. And in the back of this, the Peshmerga found 25 jerry cans packed with what they call TNT. It's actually plastic explosive. Now that would be enough to destroy a couple of tanks at the very least. An absolutely ferocious weapon, and one mercifully and very rarely was able to survive and be captured. This is not only a kind of result as far as the Peshmerga are concerned, it's also an incredibly important intelligence tool. By deconstructing how this was put together, they can better figure out how to destroy it.
This is our land, our soil.
These Christian militiamen have just come home after 2 years in forced exile. They have decided to mark their return with a symbolic gesture.
I'm going to put the cross on the church. Watch this, Daesh. I'm going to put it on the church.
All the Christians who lived in these villages around Mosul were forced out by the Islamic State group. Many were killed. These men have formed the Nineveh Plain Forces in January 2015. Their militia claims to have enrolled 500 fighters, mainly Assyrian Christians.
Our aim is to defend our land. We must never relive what we have just been through with Daesh. Our people are scattered. Some of our children are dead. We had to live in tents. Now I want to send a message to my people. Bartella is liberated.
Islamic State group militants have desecrated the church. Practically all Christian symbols have been destroyed.
Such destruction is not tolerable. No one can accept this. No religion can justify this. These terrorists have no religion. This is the house of God. It is not a military building.
For these men, the liberation of Bartella is only a first step. Mosul will have to be reconquered and secured before they can consider bringing their families back.